It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right, America, we're back. And it ain't a good morning. I'm not going to mislead you. You're catching us in episode or segment 3 of our program today. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the police state and my declaration that the Republic is dead. Long live the Republic. The Supreme Court of the United States has green-lighted what is sure to be a coming purge. It's not me saying that. These are the people who were instrumental in the case. The Supreme Court has refused to hear. They have denied cert. I don't want to get into the details of how the Supreme Court hears cases, but everybody submits their cases, and the Supreme Court either gives them certiorari and certifies that case to move forward and be heard, or they deny it. They denied it in this case. This is the Chris Hodges case. This is the case about the National Defense Authorization Act and the ability to detain a threat to national security of anyone viewed as a troublemaker. Anyone who commits a belligerent act. That's their word, not mine. Define what exactly might a belligerent act consist of. What is that? What is a belligerent act? Is it your refusal to stand down when you're told to by an officer at a protest? Is it your speaking out in a blog or a radio program that you do? What is your belligerent act? Is your belligerent act refusing to sign up for Obamacare? What exactly constitutes a belligerent act? We don't know. And guess what? We're never going to know. You know why we're never going to know? Because the people who are accused of the belligerent act are barred from access to an attorney or the court system. They don't have to, the federal government doesn't even have to notify your family you've been snatched and where you're held, or that you're even held. So how are you ever going to get in front of a court to say, Your Honor, you can't hold me until you define what a belligerent act is? Because you never even get to ask the question. You want to talk about a circular reference mathematical equation? There you go, ladies and gentlemen. It has no beginning and it has no end. And your Republicans in Congress passed this. They're the ones who wrote it. They're the ones who passed it. And they've reaffirmed it over and over and over and over and over. You know why? Because they're traitors. It's an act of treason. And they know it. That's why legislation doesn't get passed to help you, because their job is to subjugate you. They've already made the commitment. They've sold their souls to the devil, and there's no backing out of the contract. They signed it in blood. The High Court issued the order this week on Monday that they refused and returned the review. This is an appellate-level decision that says that the president and the U.S. military can arrest and indefinitely detain individuals, any individual, American, non-American, makes no difference. If that doesn't scare the pants off of you, if you don't need to go change your drawers right now, perhaps you need to rewind and listen again. Any individual can be held for the act of belligerence. I don't know about you, but I generally construe the word belligerence to have a very, very low threshold of activity. I mean, when you talk about an act of violence or an act of belligerence, the difference between those two thresholds is miles apart. Officials with the William J. Olson law firm that filed an amicus brief. That's a friend of the court. That's what that means. And an amicus brief means that they file this brief and say, we're not a defendant and we're not a plaintiff in the case, but we have an active interest and we believe that we have something to say that the court should take into consideration. That's what an amicus brief is, right? Asking the court to step in. They filed an amicus brief asking the court to step in. Please certify this to hear it because it's important. Noted that not a single justice dissented in the denial of certiorari. Now, that means that 9 out of 9 sold you out. 9 out of 9. It's a unanimous decision to allow the federal government to commit acts of treason. Hello? Quote, the court ducked. Ducked. I call it far more than that. The court ducked, having no appetite to confront both political parties in order to protect the citizens from military detention, said the legal team. Quote, the government has won, creating a tragic moment for the people and what will someday be viewed as an embarrassment for the court. Really? So, let me just remind you, let me find it here so I can give you the exact quote. So I want to remind you of, where the heck is it? Come on. Trying to find this quote. Here it is. Antonin Scalia. So let me remind you of what he said, and this is in Salon, one of the most liberal organizations out there. Anton Scalia says Japanese internment could happen again. Now this was, I did a whole show about this, a whole segment about this. This is back in February 4th of this year, right? A month and a half ago. I told you at that time, he was questioned by a student at this University of Hawaii. And he was questioned by the student in reference to the Pearl Harbor, after the Pearl Harbor attack when Japanese Americans were interned. And here's what he had to say. Well, of course Karamatsu was wrong, meaning the decision by the Supreme Court. Karamatsu versus United States was the name of the case. Well, of course Karamatsu was wrong, said Scalia. And I think we have repudiated it in a later case. Here it comes, and I want you to listen to this with extreme care. But you are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. I'm going to say that for you again. But you are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. This is a man who parses words for a living. This is a man who understands the implications of every word that he says, that are weighed word by word by word, like you would study a passage from your Savior out of the Bible. This is a man who understands that the word will is an imperative, that the word may or can has a completely different context and changes the entire tone and tenor of a statement. And he didn't say, but you're kidding yourself if you think the same thing might not happen again. That's not what he said. He said, but you're kidding yourself if you say that if you think the same thing will not happen again. In other words, it will, and I'm telling you it will. And I'm telling you what he was telling you then was that this is a telegraph of the punch to come. And the punch is right now. The government has won, says the law firm of William Olson, creating a tragic moment for the people and what will someday be viewed as an embarrassment for the court. And then I hearken you back. Again, I want you to hear Scalia's response. Well, of course Karamazov was wrong, he says. He's acknowledging the mistakes of 1944. Or, I've forgotten what Karamazov was. It wasn't 44. It was like 41, I think. 42. 43, excuse me, because it was after Pearl Harbor. So it would have been 43. Well, of course Karamazov was wrong. And I think we have repudiated it in a later case. In other words, repudiated, we rejected our own mistake in a later case. We corrected the mistake. But you are kidding yourself if you think the same thing, the same mistake, will not happen again. That same mistake is happening right now. It's just been approved and verified by them. They've green-lighted your government to create a gulag archipelago. The controversial provision authorizes the military under presidential authority to arrest, kidnap, detain without trial, and to hold indefinitely American citizens thought to, quote, represent an enduring security threat to the United States. Based on what? Who defines what that threat is? How do they define, is it enduring? How do they define you as a security threat? You'll never know. And the reason you'll never know is because you're never going to get in front of a judge. You're never even going to get an attorney who says, I can't file for you because they won't allow your case. You're not even going to get as far as picking up the phone to say, are you an attorney? I could really use your help. Because that call will never be made. Do you understand that? Do you understand the implication of that? You can't file the brief. No attorney can file the brief on your behalf. And even if the brief were to be filed, the court would reject it. Ladies and gentlemen, the circle has been closed. Dan Johnson, the PANDA national director, which is the People Against National Defense Authorization Act, right? People Against the NDAA. In 1944, he says the Supreme Court approved the preemptive detention of over 110,000 Japanese Americans. So it was 44. There's your date for Karamazov. The court's denial 70 years later proves that we cannot rely on 9 people in black robes to defend our freedom. It is now up to the states, cities, counties, and the people of this nation to show the Supreme Court that it is not the final arbiter of our human rights. As 5 cities have already done so, I urge Americans across the country to begin action to ban these sections in their communities, raise awareness, and push back against this denial. If Washington, D.C. thinks this is the last they will hear from us, they are very, very wrong. One of the plaintiffs, the lead plaintiffs in the case, it wasn't just Hodges, it was a whole group of plaintiffs. And by the way, most of them are journalists. They're journalists who are saying, this is silencing our free speech because we could go over there and do an interview with some Al-Qaeda, ringleader, and the next thing you know, when we come back in and we fly back in and we land in Dallas or in L.A. airport, we get picked up for aiding and abetting a terrorist. That's our belligerent act. Tangerine Bolin writes, quote, we are no longer a nation ruled by laws. We are a nation ruled by men who have so steeped themselves in a false narrative that at the same time they are exponentially increasing the ranks of terrorists. They are destroying the rule of law itself. It is madness upon madness. The classic tale of becoming the evil you purport to fight while believing you remain righteous. I couldn't have said it better. In Panda's article, they go on to finalize their final comment. If the outcome of this lawsuit does not cement the fact that the courts will not defend the Constitution nor our rights, then there is little more evidence to be presented. The federal tier has failed us. the states, localities, and eventually the people are where we will stand. As we resist, the work of the plaintiffs will not be forgotten. So let me quantify something for you, because I want you to hear the statement of where the heck was it? Well, let me just read it to you, because I read it to you yesterday, and if it hasn't sunk in, I want you to hear it again. You seem to consider the judges as the ultimate arbiters of all constitutional questions. A very dangerous doctrine indeed, and one which would put us under the despotism of an oligarchy. The Constitution has erected no such single tribunal. Thomas Jefferson, 1820. Ladies and gentlemen, what more do you need to see to know that the Supreme Court of the United States is acting in open, blatant, undisguised treason? 9 justices unanimously refused to hear this case. That's exactly what it is. Meanwhile, they're going to hear a case about sneakers, and they're going to hear another case about some civil lawsuit, and they're going to hear a case about some guy who got caught with drugs and whether or not, they should have been allowed to peek in his underwear with a spy scope. You know what? It's minutia. While everyone's ignoring the elephant in the room, they're stomping on the ants. Jefferson also went on to say, much earlier than that earlier quote I just read you, cherish, therefore, the spirit of our people, and keep alive their attention. Their attention to what? The republic itself, and the preservation thereof. Cherish, therefore, the spirit of our people, and keep alive their attention. Do not be too severe upon their errors, but reclaim them by enlightening them. For if once they become inattentive to public affairs, you and I, and Congress, and assemblies, meaning states, judges, and governors shall all become wolves. Ladies and gentlemen, the wolves are just wearing clothing made of wool. Now, under the National Defense Authorization Act, which incorporates these vague terms like substantial support, direct support for Al-Qaeda or an enemy, a declared enemy. Well, wait a second. Stop right there. I bring you back to Benghazi then. Substantial support, would that not include weapons, money? Direct support, would that not include funneling weapons through Libya to Al-Qaeda? I rest my case. And a belligerent act. And if one falls under any of these terms, you are subjected to indefinite military detention without charge or trial. Why should that matter to you? Well, because the implications of this are world-changing. The controversial provision authorizes the military under presidential authority to arrest, kidnap, detain, without trial, and or hold indefinitely American citizens thought to, quote, represent an enduring security threat to the United States. Another friend of the court brief that was submitted in the case. Many law firms and interested parties submitted amicus briefs. Quote, the central question now before this court is whether the federal judiciary will stand idly by while Congress and the president establish the legal framework for the establishment of a police state and the subjugation of the American citizenry through the threat of indefinite military arrest and detention without the right to counsel, the right to confront one's accuser, or the right to a trial. These are learned people who wrote these court briefs. These are not, this isn't Mike who's just saying this stuff. This was in a brief that went before the Supreme Court that they read and then rejected. Now you tell me that has no bearing on the nation. You see, here's the problem, ladies and gentlemen. The republic is dead. Long live the banana republic. The NDAA was fast-tracked through Congress in 2012. It was reaffirmed in 2013. And the 2014 NDAA was fast-tracked through Congress, too. And it added even more layers, essentially making sure that not only could you be picked up and held indefinitely, but that there were organizations that were establishing a framework to legitimize what the NSA has been doing to us all along by creating these massive databases. And the reason they did that was as a preemptory measure in case Congress actually got some backbone or public pressure was so great that they had to stop the NSA. Then they could say, okay, we have to stop doing it publicly through the NSA, but now we can do it through the NDAA, and we can still accomplish the same goal. 85 of 100 senators voted in favor of the newest version of the NDAA. 85 out of 100. 85 out of 100. Did you hear what I just said? And the House of Representatives? No sweat. Just pass it. I know nothing. In Section 1021 of the 2012 NDAA and its successors, in other words, the other NDAA approvals after that, which, by the way, for the record, the NDAA is the National Defense Authorization Act. It's what authorizes the monetary spending to pay the soldiers and buy the tanks and the missiles and the bullets and the blah, 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 blah. Why are they passing activities like this under that? Ladies and gentlemen, SCOTUS has green-lighted the coming purge. The republic is dead. Long live the republic. Mark my words. You save this segment, and you pull it back up when the truth comes to bite you. All right, you've been listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the EPA's commissioned fake science that it is paying for like a commissioned piece of artwork to accomplish its agenda, to arrive at a predestined, biased solution or answer or equation that establishes what they want it to say. You see, when you do it that way, it carries no credibility because you're now looking at the world through the lens of the artist who was commissioned to do the work. There's no peer review. We'll be right back.